I'm facing an impossible situation. At 28, I went from being an experienced nurse saving lives to someone who needs help with basic daily tasks. Being blind means relying on what others tell me, but my medical training keeps making me second guess everyone's interpretations. My colleagues from the hospital say one thing, my fiancé James claims another, and my medical instincts are screaming something entirely different. The worst part isn't just the darkness. It's being unable to verify symptoms and conditions myself, something I've been trained to do for the past 5 years. The accident happened during a routine emergency transport. I was treating a cardiac arrest patient when our ambulance was hit. I remember hearing the impact before everything went dark. Now I find myself on the other side of healthcare, dependent on others' assessments and care plans. Every time someone describes my condition, my mind automatically starts cataloging symptoms and possible treatments, old habits from my days that now just add to my frustration. A few days ago, my colleague Emily, now my primary caregiver, shared something that could destroy my engagement. She's been with me since the accident 6 months ago, helping me navigate this new reality. We worked together in the for 3 years before this, so she knows my routines, my medical preferences, even how I like my medical equipment arranged. The accident was devastating. A side impact during a code blue transport. The spinal trauma unit kept me for 3 months, running endless neurological tests as my vision deteriorated week by week until the darkness was complete. While other colleagues visit occasionally, Emily has been my constant support, both as a medical professional and a friend. Her background in emergency nursing means she understands both my medical needs and my frustration at being on this side of patient care. What terrifies me most is losing James, my fiancé. We met when he was demonstrating new emergency response equipment to our team. Despite his background in medical sales, he struggled with commitment, often switching companies when better commissions came along. His parents, both retired physicians, enabled this behavior by covering his expenses, which didn't help his professional development. I only agreed to marry him after he showed real growth, securing a stable position with a major medical equipment supplier and maintaining it for over a year. His mother wasn't pleased. She wanted him to take over their private practice's administration, but James was determined to prove himself in the medical sales field. I thought he was finally becoming the healthcare professional I always believed he could be. My colleagues were skeptical, especially my department head, who wanted me to consider dating one of our attending physicians instead. In the hospital, after my diagnosis became permanent, I tried breaking off our engagement. As a healthcare provider, I knew the challenges ahead, the specialized equipment needed, the adaptive techniques for daily living, the ongoing rehabilitation. I assumed James wouldn't want to handle the medical complexities of a blind wife, especially since he was just stabilizing his career in medical sales. But he refused to leave, insisting he'd spent years learning about emergency care equipment for me and wouldn't give up now. My department head even offered to buy him out of the relationship with a lucrative hospital contract, a fact I learned later from the charge nurse. James turned down the offer, which shocked everyone in the unit since he'd always been motivated by sales numbers and commission rates. The hospital stay was excruciating. I spent weeks in that bed, my medical knowledge becoming my worst enemy. Every beep of the monitors, every medication adjustment. I knew exactly what they meant, but couldn't see them to verify. The only thing keeping me going was James' daily visits. He'd bring medical journals in audio format, discuss his equipment presentations, and help me practice using other senses for patient assessment. The nursing staff kept telling me how lucky I was to have such a dedicated fiancé in the medical field. My supervisor noticed something odd, though. He only visited during rounds when other medical staff were present, never during the critical overnight hours when support was most needed. At home, after 3 months in the hospital, my colleague suggested transferring me to a specialized rehabilitation facility in Vermont. They have an excellent program for healthcare workers with visual impairments. James immediately opposed this plan. He convinced everyone that staying in familiar surroundings near our hospital would be better for my recovery. That's when my department proposed having Emily move in with us. She's my mother's best friend's daughter and has been an nurse for 10 years. The arrangement seemed perfect initially. Emily handled my medical needs. James continued his sales routes, and I started learning adaptive techniques for healthcare work. I even began working with a specialist who teaches visually impaired medical professionals how to continue practicing. My sister Sarah, who works in medical records, helped with wedding planning. She's younger than me by 2 years and has always been the social butterfly of the hospital staff. While I was focused on emergency medicine, she knew everyone from every department. Having her around made things feel more normal. Her medical records expertise helping plan an accessible wedding. Daily routine. Emily maintained professional boundaries during these planning sessions, drawing from her years of experience where emotional distance is crucial. She's been in nursing since she was 22, having learned early about patient care when her mother developed complications from surgery. Unlike Sarah, who shares all the hospital gossip, Emily only speaks when medical information needs to be conveyed. One morning, while helping me organize my medical supplies one morning, Emily said she needed to discuss something important. This was unusual. She typically keeps our interactions focused on medical care and rehabilitation. She mentioned that in her decade of emergency nursing, she's developed a keen sense for noticing irregular patterns in both patient and staff behavior. Last year, she even helped uncover a case of prescription fraud in the ER. She said her medical ethics wouldn't allow her to stay silent about what she'd observed in our home, especially given our history as colleagues. After several minutes of careful phrasing, I asked her to be direct. It's how we always communicated in the ER. That's when she told me she suspected James and Sarah were having an affair. I made her repeat it twice, my medical training kicking in as I tried to analyze the information objectively. My fiancé and my sister, the same fiancé who turned down a hospital contract to stay with me after the accident. It seemed clinically impossible. When I asked for evidence, Emily admitted she didn't have concrete proof, but described a pattern of suspicious behaviors. They'd brush against each other unnecessarily in the medication storage area. James would touch Sarah's back while reaching for medical supplies. And they'd grown bold enough to do this even when I was in the room, apparently assuming my blindness made me oblivious to spatial awareness. Emily also reported hearing them whispering during night shifts when they thought everyone was asleep. She noted their suspicious 2-hour absence last week when they claimed to be picking up wedding supplies from the medical supply store. Processing the information. I wanted to dismiss Emily's observations completely. My medical training demands evidence, not just circumstantial symptoms. James has his flaws. He's careless with inventory records, still plays video games between sales calls like a resident, and can't keep his car organized despite selling medical transportation equipment. But having an affair with my sister. This is the same man who spent 3 years saving commission checks for my engagement ring when he could have easily asked his physician parents for money. The same person who attended every neurological consultation after my accident. And Sarah. We've shared everything since medical school, from textbooks to patient stories. The idea of them betraying me seems clinically improbable. Now I can't stop analyzing every interaction between James and Sarah over the past 4 years, using the same systematic approach I'd use for reviewing patient histories. They became close during my parents' medical conference, where James helped Sarah organize a healthcare vendor fair. After that, they'd often have lunch together when James was doing equipment demonstrations near her department. I always appreciated their professional rapport, but now I'm questioning everything. like the time James insisted on driving Sarah home after my engagement party because she'd had too much wine, but they didn't return for 3 hours. Or how Sarah suddenly started appearing at our house most mornings, claiming she wanted to help me prepare for the day while checking medical records. Maybe Emily's assessment is wrong. She's only observed them for 6 months, while I've known Sarah my entire medical career. My sister was there during my first failed intubation at 16, and she's the one who actually introduced me to James at the hospital's equipment fair. Then again, Emily spends more time observing them now than I do, given my therapy appointments and rest periods. Current situation. Both James and Sarah have made sacrifices since my accident. James took a lower commission position to have flexible hours for my medical appointments. Sarah reduced her hours in medical records to help with my recovery. These don't seem like the actions of people planning betrayal. Still, I can't ignore how James' behavior has changed. His clinical touch during exercises feels rushed, impersonal. Initially, I attributed it to caregiver fatigue, but maybe there's more to investigate. The thought of confronting them makes me physically ill. These symptoms of stress are all too familiar from my days. I'm completely dependent on them right now. James manages our medical insurance claims, and Sarah coordinates my appointments when Emily isn't available. My former colleagues live hours away, and my closest friends from nursing school have taken positions in different states. Being blind is isolating enough without pushing away my primary support system. Plus, our medical community is tightly connected. James' mother already bought her mother of the groom outfit, and Sarah handles all the wedding vendors through her hospital contacts. Support group meeting. I've posted about my situation on a support forum for visually impaired healthcare professionals, hoping to connect with someone who might have dealt with similar circumstances in the medical field. Update: 2 weeks later. It's been 2 weeks since my last post. I apologize for any errors. I'm using medical dictation software, but it's not perfect with clinical terminology. My colleague from the support group recommended a medical transcriptionist who specializes in helping visually impaired healthcare workers, which has made documentation easier. The transcriptionist happens to be connected with my neuro-ophthalmologist, which became significant later. These past weeks have been a nightmare of professional paranoia and personal doubt. Every interaction between James and Sarah feels like analyzing suspicious symptoms. Last Tuesday, I heard them laughing about equipment inventory, but they went silent when I entered the room. Yesterday, James took 20 minutes to explain a simple sales call, and Sarah completely redirected the conversation when I asked about patient records. They used to be direct and efficient in their communications before the accident. Now everything feels calculated, like they're cross-checking their stories. When I pointed this out, James claimed they were just being more careful with medical terminology since my accident. This explanation might make sense if they didn't speak normally about procedures and equipment when they think I'm resting. Emily has become my eyes in this situation, both literally and professionally. She monitors their behavior whenever possible, though it's challenging since she's occupied with my medical care. She takes me to physical therapy 3 times weekly, assists with personal care, and guides my rehabilitation exercises. The only time she's not with me is during sleep or when James insists on handling medical procedures himself. Emily reported catching them in an intense whispered discussion in the supply room last week, but they claimed they were debating wedding centerpiece designs. The strange part is that we finalized those decorations a month ago. Medical consultation. During my last neuro-ophthalmology checkup, my specialist mentioned something crucial. The damage to my optic nerves isn't as permanent as initially diagnosed. There's an experimental surgical procedure that could restore approximately 75% of my vision, but it carries significant risks. Potential complications could affect my entire nervous system. The surgery would involve multiple procedures over several weeks, with a 40% success rate. The decision was left to me, but Emily thinks this might be our chance to verify her observations. Decision making. When my neuro-ophthalmologist first presented the surgical option, I immediately declined. The 3 months in the trauma unit after the accident were enough. Endless neurological tests, constant monitoring, rotating shifts of nurses who were once my colleagues. My hospital room became my entire world, transformed from a place where I once treated patients to where I became one. I couldn't even use the bathroom without assistance, a humbling experience for someone who used to run trauma codes. My hair started falling out from stress, and I developed panic attacks at the sound of medical equipment I used to work with daily. The prospect of going through all that again with only a 40% chance of success seemed medically unsound. However, Emily's been showing me case studies from similar procedures. We've been analyzing everything: the surgeon's clinical history, potential complications, recovery protocols, and insurance coverage. The procedure would cost nearly $200,000, but my medical malpractice insurance would cover 80%. James has been pushing me to save the insurance money for our future house, which seems odd since he used to advocate for trying every available treatment. My brother, a clinical pharmacist, reviewed the medication protocol and says it's actually less intensive than my previous treatments. Internal conflict. The idea of surprising James at our wedding by being able to see him at the altar keeps playing in my mind. But Emily's more focused on using this as a way to confirm her clinical observations about him and Sarah. The surgery would require at least 6 weeks of recovery, meaning I'd be back home about 3 weeks before the wedding, assuming no post-operative complications. I feel ethically conflicted about potentially using a medical procedure as surveillance. What if I endure all this trauma and surgical risk, only to find my suspicions were unfounded? My therapist, who specializes in healthcare worker trauma, says I need to be certain about my motivations. Am I pursuing this surgery for medical rehabilitation or just to verify suspected betrayal? Update: 3 months later. 3 months have passed, and I went through with the surgery. After extensive research and consultations with former patients, I decided to take the medical risk. The pre-operative preparation was rigorous. I had to discontinue certain medications, undergo multiple neurological screenings, and follow a strict nutrition protocol, as the surgeon insisted recovery would be more successful with optimal body mass. I spent 5 days in pre-operative procedures before the main surgery could begin. I told everyone I was attending a specialized rehabilitation program for visually impaired healthcare workers in Boston. James and Sarah immediately suggested that Emily should return to her hospital duties during this time to reduce expenses. According to them, paying her full nursing salary while I was away wasn't cost-effective. I attempted to argue that she could maintain my medical equipment and rehabilitation space, but they were insistent. They even contacted my former supervisor to support their case, claiming Emily deserved a break from care duties. My department had agreed, suggesting it would give James and Sarah time to finalize wedding preparations. The whole situation seemed convenient for them, but I couldn't challenge it without revealing my surgical plans. Emily found temporary accommodations near the surgical center. She divided her time between my post-operative care and picking up shifts in the center's intensive care unit to maintain her income. The surgery itself exceeded expectations, but recovery was intense. I spent 4 weeks managing severe post-operative headaches and photosensitivity. The medical team had to repeatedly adjust my medication protocol due to complications with the initial prescriptions. Throughout everything, Emily was there, helping me with vision exercises and interpreting my medical charts. During those long nights in the hospital, Emily shared her story. While I was attending nursing school and doing clinical rotations, she was working night shifts at an urgent care clinic at age 14 to help cover her mother's medical expenses. Her father abandoned them when she was young, and her mother developed multiple sclerosis shortly after. She had to pause her nursing education to work full-time in patient care. Meanwhile, my biggest concern in my early career was choosing between a position in my father's private practice or pursuing emergency medicine. The contrast in our professional paths became starkly clear during these conversations. Hospital reflections. The month in the surgical unit completely shifted my perspective. Before the accident, my life revolved around emergency protocols and trying to shape James into a reliable medical professional. I had this perfect prescription for our future: a suburban house near the hospital, 2 children, and weekend gatherings with other healthcare couples. Now, lying in post-operative care, I was terrified about what I might discover when my vision returned. I started questioning my true professional and personal aspirations. Perhaps I could use my insurance settlement to establish a clinic for healthcare workers with disabilities instead of investing in a house with James. I could travel to medical conferences, pursue further specialization. The accident forced me to realize I've been following someone else's prescription for a perfect life. Update: 1 month later. It's been a month since my last update, and the surgery was successful. I now have 75% of my vision restored, exceeding the surgical team's projections. Colors in the periphery are still slightly blurred, and I require specialized photochromatic lenses for light sensitivity, but it's remarkable compared to complete darkness. Back home, I've maintained the pretense of blindness. The prescription glasses help maintain this narrative, since I need them for light protection anyway. Emily has resumed her position, and we've returned to our previous routine, except now I can actually observe the situations around me. These past weeks have been emotionally and professionally draining. There have been at least 10 instances where I wanted to announce my restored vision, like when James canceled our weekly medical equipment review, claiming he had a late sales call, but I saw him drive off with Sarah instead. Or when they spent 3 hours organizing wedding favors in the supply room while I was supposedly resting. I remained silent because I needed to understand the full extent of their deception. More critically, I needed to know why James was proceeding with the wedding. Was it guilt, professional obligation, or perhaps related to my pending insurance settlement next month? The revelation. Yesterday, I finally obtained the evidence I needed, though I wish I hadn't. I was in the living room while they were supposedly discussing the reception menu in the kitchen. Through the reflection in our glass-fronted medical cabinet, I witnessed their entire interaction. Sarah was leaning against the counter while James prepared coffee. They were speaking in whispers before she kissed his cheek. Instead of maintaining professional boundaries, he turned and kissed her fully. My hands trembled so violently, I nearly dropped my medical tablet. 4 years of trust and professional partnership destroyed in 10 seconds. The worst part was watching them compose themselves and return to the living room, asking if I wanted coffee. After witnessing that, I called Emily, pretending I needed assistance with wedding medical arrangements. When James and Sarah inquired about the issue, I fabricated a story about needing to visit the medical supply boutique. The way they exchanged glances when I mentioned the wedding, like sharing some private joke at my expense, made me nauseous. Instead, I smiled and discussed my excitement about finalizing the medical arrangements for the ceremony. James actually had the audacity to squeeze my hand, saying he couldn't wait to become my husband. Understanding the betrayal. James's enthusiasm about proceeding with the wedding suddenly clicked everything into place. Instead of appearing trapped or guilty, he seemed almost eager. He and Sarah shared a knowing look, and he actually grinned. That's when I recalled my conversation with my medical insurance representative last month. There's a $800,000 settlement coming at the end of the year, primarily for ongoing medical care and lost wages from my emergency room position. If we're married when that payment arrives, James would have legal access to those funds. The wedding timing suddenly made perfect sense, scheduled exactly 8 weeks before the final insurance settlement. The insurance payments have been coming in smaller increments until now. $5,000 here, $10,000 there for medical bills and rehabilitation, but the major settlement was always scheduled for December. James has been unusually interested in my insurance documentation lately, always offering to handle calls with the claims adjusters. He even suggested I switch to his cousin's medical law firm for handling the settlement, which I now realize would have given him even more control over the funds. Last week, I overheard him on the phone with a real estate agent discussing a private medical practice property, something we definitely couldn't afford on his medical equipment sales commission alone. The final pieces. His behavior since the accident makes so much more sense now. The lack of physical affection during therapy sessions. No more supportive touches during exercises. None of those small gestures he used to do constantly. He claims it's because he's afraid of interfering with my recovery, but I've seen how gentle he can be with Sarah. Just yesterday, he helped her adjust her bridesmaid dress while maintaining complete professional distance from me. I checked our joint account statements. He's been taking Sarah to expensive medical conferences while claiming to be at late sales meetings. Planning the revelation. I've decided to host a pre-wedding celebration next week. I've already sent invitations to everyone. James's entire medical sales team, all our hospital colleagues, Meyer's staff, even his regional manager whom he despises. Sarah is helping plan it, thinking it's just another bridal shower. She even convinced our former attending physicians to fly in early. The venue is booked. The catering is arranged. Not through her hospital contacts, which raised some eyebrows, and I've prepared a very special presentation of medical evidence for the occasion. Emily has been helping me gather documentation, financial records, surveillance photos, text messages. She managed to document from James' phone when he left it charging in the nurse's station. They think they're so careful, but they have no idea what's coming. Final update. 4 days later. The wedding is officially canceled. Last night, I ended my engagement in front of 60 medical professionals at what was supposed to be our pre-wedding celebration. Everyone was there. James' colleagues from medical equipment sales, my team, our hospital staff, even my old attending physicians. The party started normally enough. People were enjoying champagne, sampling hors d'oeuvres, congratulating us on the upcoming wedding. James' mother kept showing everyone brochures of a private practice she wanted us to buy nearby. Sarah was playing the perfect maid of honor, ensuring everyone's glasses stayed full. I waited until after dinner to make my announcement. When I removed my protective glasses and revealed I could see, the room erupted in professional excitement. My former colleagues started crying. James' father was calling it a medical miracle. But James and Sarah looked like they'd just lost a patient. James kept opening and closing his mouth like a medical student in their first trauma case, while Sarah suddenly found her nursing shoes fascinating. It was the first time in weeks I'd seen them maintain appropriate professional distance from each other. Then came the questions about my treatment timeline. I explained everything: the high-risk surgery 3 months ago, the recovery period in Boston, the surgical team who gave me a 40% chance of success. Emily, playing her part perfectly, asked why I hadn't saved this revelation for the wedding day. That's when I turned to James and Sarah and told them this was my wedding gift to them. I started listing specific dates and times. Their afternoon in the hospital's supply closet while I was supposedly at physical therapy. Their late-night meeting in his car last week. The intimate moments they thought no one could witness. With each detail, Sarah's face lost its color, and James' hands started shaking like a first-year resident. When Sarah attempted to deny it, I described the surgical scar on her lower back that James had been touching in the break room 3 days ago. That silenced her immediately. The confrontation. James actually tried to turn this around professionally. He stood up in front of our medical community and claimed I was the dishonest one for concealing the surgery. My department chief had to restrain me when James claimed my trust issues had ruined our relationship. That's when I revealed the documentation Emily had helped me prepare. Inside were printouts of his recent credit card statements showing hotel charges near medical conferences, screenshots of his browser history researching divorce lawyers, and copies of his email to his cousin about accessing my insurance settlement after the wedding. The final insurance payment would be $800,000, enough for them to start their own medical practice together. My mother started berating him in both English and medical terminology. His parents looked mortified, especially when I mentioned how they'd helped him research marriage laws regarding disability benefits. James' sister actually broke down crying, saying she'd caught them together in the hospital break room, but didn't know how to report it. Meanwhile, Sarah kept trying to approach me, sobbing about how it just happened and how they never meant to cause harm. I told her to save her performance for her next hospital committee meeting. After 30 minutes of complete chaos, with medical staff taking sides and others attempting to mediate, I'd had enough. I informed James he had 24 hours to remove his belongings from my house. He tried arguing about his name being on the lease, but I reminded him that my parents had covered every payment since the accident. My father's already contacted his healthcare attorney to handle the paperwork. Sarah attempted to follow me as I left, but Emily blocked her path. Last I heard, she's staying at a motel because our hospital administration won't let her return to work yet. Epilogue. I've been in my room since last night, ignoring the flood of messages from our medical community. My colleagues want to take me on a recovery retreat. James' mother keeps calling to apologize, but right now, I just need space to process. The only person I'm speaking with is Emily, who's been bringing me meals and helping me sort through the wreckage of my personal and professional life. The pain comes in waves, like the aftermath of a difficult trauma case. One minute I'm relieved it's over. The next, I'm reviewing old hospital photos, wondering if they were together even then. Mostly, I feel like a failed diagnostician for not seeing the symptoms earlier. My mother warned me about James' pattern of living off others. First his physician parents, then me. He hasn't maintained a stable position in medical sales since graduation, always claiming he was exploring different specialties while I covered our expenses. The accident insurance was probably the biggest opportunity he'd ever seen. At least I discovered the truth before signing those marriage certificates. Some medical errors you can correct, but this betrayal isn't one of them. Our colleagues keep pushing for reconciliation, saying the medical community should stick together, but as far as I'm concerned, I only have one true colleague I can trust now, Emily.